Hey, this is Winston Zeddemore, CEO of Zeddemore Industries and member of the original Ghostbuster team. You're listening to Why We Bust, brought to you by the Windy City Ghostbusters and Memoriam Development. We're talking about members in the community and giving back. So suit up, shut your traps, dial in your PKE, and keep busting. Because it still feels good. And before you ask, no, I did not catch the number of that ghost train. Sorry, I missed it.
And thank you, Winston. Welcome back, everyone, to Why We Bust, the podcast where we explore the Ghostbusters fandom, one proton pack journey at a time. I'm your host, Matt Goltemote, and today we're headed to the shores of Lake Erie to spotlight a fan who's helping the Ghostbusters legacy, keeping it alive in Ohio. Joining us tonight is Steve Manchir of Ghostbusters Cleveland. Known for his passion, presence at local events, and dedication to fandom, Steve represents what it means to turn childhood love into real-world fun and impact. Whether he's suiting up for a convention or helping his team connect with the community, he's busted in style and with a purpose. Today, we'll talk about his journey into the Ghostbusters world, the Cleveland team story, and the role his fandom plays in building something bigger than just nostalgia. So, let's get started. And hey, to all those out there, we're minus a producer tonight. They're out having fun. So the inmates are running the asylum tonight. So luckily, we got the stream up. We're good to go. And yeah, so Steve, welcome, man. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
We're glad to have you. So Ghostbusters Cleveland. Tell me a little bit about the team. How did it start?
Sure. So the first iteration of Ghostbusters Cleveland started with some of my college friends back around the turn of the century. We were looking for a thing that we could do, the four of us, and eventually a couple others who joined in. We did our first proton packs out of styrofoam and MDF and shampoo bottles, and basically became a fixture at conventions for a while. Gen Con down in Indy. And just had fun with it. And then as things happen, we kind of, quote unquote, grew out of it. Other things came about. And then back in 2012, I was driving my little Mini Cooper. I was working for a job down in Kentucky and hit a deer and totaled my Mini and decided to buy a new Mini Cooper Clubman. And the dealership's like, hey, we've got this car costume contest, decorate your car, win a prize, whatever. And I well, we've got a Ghostbuster suit. I've got, so I'll do Ecto 1 with the Mini Cooper. And the rest is kind of history. I won that little thing at my dealership, put that money into making it a little bit more elaborate again, moved back up to here to Cleveland and started getting invited to events. And that's when I got, introduced to the whole, Ghostbuster franchise world. And we worked with one of the franchises here in Cleveland that kind of, again, ran out of steam. They've been back and forth and decided that, this is a good time. So let's make our own franchise, sort of resurrect it from the ashes. And we've been going ever since.
Nice. Like a phoenix from the ashes. That's all. It's always a good story to hear that, sometimes when things don't work out, you pick up the pieces and you figure out. That's a good, learning lesson. Is you figure out what worked, what didn't, and then you carry it into the next iteration.
For sure.
How many events do you guys do a year, you think?
I mean, we have gotten very busy. We occasionally will do multiple events per weekend. So I'm guessing we're at least up over 50 events per year now, probably closer to 60, 70 if you count. Some of our members will do little things like car shows with their Ecto or little, meet and greets at libraries and stuff around town. And then we have like the bigger events, the Comic Cons, the parades, the big charity events that we probably do a couple dozen of per year.
That's not bad for us, for a team. How many members do you guys have?
We probably have about a dozen active who are sort of like involved, like with the decision making of what events we do and are in our private Facebook group. And then we've got sort of like an auxiliary. We've got sort of like a semi-private Facebook page for just cosplayers, people who, help out occasionally. Maybe they do 1 or 2 events per year, but those kind of people help you keep going. So, we know people who, do Ghostbusters, but they do Jurassic Park. They do Ghostbusters, but they do Marvel. And so if we can get them out to bust, 2 or 3 times a year, that's all that we ask.
No, that's really cool. I'm a huge fan of really anything cosplay. Whatever gets you out of your element in your day to day, and puts that smile on your face. Oh, there we go.
I've got a few.
What else do you do?
I'm old enough that I only do cosplays that involve wearing a jumpsuit, because everything else. So I have Mystery Science Theater 3000. I have Spaceballs. I have Fallout, and of course Ghostbusters are my big ones. So
nice. You keep it diverse,
but still wearing a jumpsuit.
That's good. Hey, you know what? And I will say, gentlemen of our age, I think we look good in a jumpsuit. There's something about a guy wearing a jumpsuit that just hits all the right notes. And
it does. It's very odd that it has this air of authority, that people listen to you as long as you look like you know what you're doing, and you're wearing a jumpsuit. People will just listen to you. You can, whether it's doing crowd control at an event, or I was doing a scavenger hunt in costume or in uniform, I should say, a few Halloweens ago. And one of the things was take a picture of a Wendy's employee eating a Big Mac. And I was able to talk someone into doing it. He did clock out first, so he didn't do it on the clock.
Okay.
But he clocked out, and he took the picture eating the Big Mac. And then he said, "Did you get the picture?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he spat it out and said, "Okay." But still, the fact that he was willing to do it just because I was suited up, I was impressed.
I tell you, some of the stories you get while you're in gear and stuff. What's one of your besides that? What's one of your favorite stories about being in uniform?
Oh, geez, there's so many of them. Not me, but one of our members. We were at the Afterlife premiere, and they were headed to the bathroom and ran into Paul Rudd. Literally, wasn't looking. And he looked down and said, "Oh, I love your franchise patch." And they were like, "Oh my God," didn't want to wash that shoulder for the next 4 months. But so hopefully he has our little franchise patch. It's if you've never seen it, it's a little guardian. It's our statues here in Cleveland, and our local artist did a great job with it. And so it is a really nice patch. But that was just cool that in that moment he's like, "Oh wow, cool patch."
That is cool to be recognized by Paul Rudd, who I believe is a vampire.
There's something, yeah. I think he's doing the whole Ghostbusters thing to draw attention away from the paranormal investigators who might be otherwise looking into the whole Dorian Gray thing a little too close.
I'm telling you, the man doesn't age.
He's 87 years old. Did you know that? It's amazing.
I would have said 187, and I would have been could have fooled me.
What was the Spanish-American War really like? You could ask.
Yeah, right. What was your first Model T experience like? So all right. So what? Because Ghostbusters, we like to give back to the community. Yeah. It's fun to get dressed up. It's fun to interact with people, but it's also fun to give back. So what charity do you guys help benefit?
Sure. Our two main ones right now are the Ronald McDonald House of North Houston, Ohio, and the Animal Protective League, the pet shelter here in Cleveland. And so those are the ones that we, whether dogs and cats living together or helping the kids, either way, we often will offer. Sometimes it feels like if you offer people a choice, they're more likely to, well, I want this one or I want this one, and it's great. Almost everybody has a story either, unfortunately, about Ron McDonald House and their family or a family that they know that's been helped by them, or so many people have a pet that's come from the APL. So there's a lot of personal stories that we get just as we're helping the groups out.
That's so true. I mean, when choosing a charity to benefit, I think you have a couple wonderful ones, and it's always something that's going to draw people in and bring attention to those causes. I'm a dog and cat lover myself. More dogs than cats. I mean, Cats, I feel cats are very opinionated.
They can be aloof. They can be aloof.
Aloof is a good way to put it. I like that. All right, so where can we find Ghostbusters Cleveland? Facebook? Where do you guys have all your stuff at?
Yeah, we are on Facebook, Ghostbusters Cleveland, and the Instagram that the kids seem to like. We haven't gotten the TikTok yet, so we've got a committee looking at that. But we also have a YouTube channel, GBCLE, that we've done a couple of things with. We're not that active, but we've got ideas. So hopefully we'll start being on YouTube a bit more here as we figure out what exactly we want to do with it.
Hey, ideas are good, man. I find implementing the ideas is sometimes the hard part, right?
It is. We did a couple short little films. We've got, the Real Ohio Ghostbusters here do that fan film marathon every year. And we've done some little shorts and stuff to help, fill the gaps. But we have a space at Ingenuity. It's artist, engineering, workspace, creative thing, one of the many old factories we have here that's been repurposed. And someone recently moved in just upstairs from us that's a videographer and does filmmaking. And so I've been talking with them a little bit about what can we do together. So hopefully we'll have some stuff here. That's always helpful, finding someone who actually knows what they're doing instead of muddling it through yourself.
Hey, help is always welcome, right? Any help sometimes is better than no help.
Yes.
All right. So we've learned a little bit about Ghostbusters Cleveland. Now let's learn a little bit about you. So let's get down to where and when was the first time you remember hearing about Ghostbusters?
Hearing about Ghostbusters. Oh man. Well, this is going to show I was in elementary school, and I remember seeing the advertisement. I'll be honest, I was not impressed by the first trailers. I did not think it was going to be all that funny. But again, I was 8 years old, so I didn't like anything back then. It's this is going to be, well, not lame. We hadn't invented the word lame yet, but it was one of those things like, but there's a haunted house. What's this going to be? It's not going to. But obviously, once I saw the film and once I had watched the VHS tape until it wore itself out, and then I changed my opinion of it quite a bit. But I do remember, my first thing I was talking with my friends about how this movie doesn't look like it's going to be all that great.
Little did you know.
I know.
Oh, that's great. So you said you saw it in the theater?
I'm honestly trying to remember if I did, because I lived in a very small town. I remember the first movie that I saw was Jedi, which was 1983. So that was the first one. So if I saw it in the theater, I honestly don't recall it, because again, it was many, many moons ago. I think I must have, but it's one of those things I've seen it so many times after that it could have just been on VHS or on HBO or on USA or whatever. But I unfortunately don't have a strong memory of seeing it in the theater. It was always, growing up, it was one of my favorite films, but it wasn't the ultimate one that I built my life around. Some people who are really into Ghostbusters, they can remember the first time they saw it, they remember the first time they saw the second one, they remember the first toy that they had. I mean, I remember I did have a cardboard box that I made into a proton pack and ran around with, but it's something that really didn't sort of enter my life as anything more than just another film that I liked until, as I said, we started, dressing up, and it was basically just, what can four people do together, and have it be something that we can do. So, we almost ended up as Space Marines, and I'd be on a very different podcast right now.
That very true, but you didn't, and I give you props for that. So Ghostbusters, yeah, right. Ghostbusters comes out, then Real Ghostbusters comes out. So you had to be probably nine or 10, and I know as a 9 or 10-year-old, I still watch cartoons.
Well, yeah.
Did you get into Real Ghostbusters?
Oh yeah, for sure. And not until later did I find out, that especially the first few seasons were very well written, the animation is always questionable, anything from the 80s, but the stories that they try to tell, there's a reason that we got into it. It was not just another standard, half hour long, commercial. They definitely did try to, do their own storytelling, and the cartoon was, I think of a lot of people, even more than the movie, remember getting into Ghostbusters. It's something that that those cartoons really, I think, set a lot of, what people think of when they think of Ghostbusters, even if they don't really realize it, that they definitely were, just, and, I mean, it's not old, but, kids these days don't know what it was like, Saturday morning, you'd sit down and you'd watch the cartoons, and we actually had prime time. They would have a thing of previewing, like, here's what the cartoon shows are for this next year coming up, and you would stay up and you would watch that, and like, oh my gosh, they're going to have another year of Ghostbusters, or they're going to have Garfield and Friends, and like that was like big news when we didn't have the internet, when we didn't have it's like, oh, this is I'm now finding out what the cartoons are going to be for the next year. It was a big thing, and you couldn't just go and scroll down a long list and say, I want to watch this episode now, and it just appears. That would have blown 8-year-old me's mind.
Isn't that crazy though? Like I think back to those days too, where it's like, okay, where's a VHS tape I can record over? Where did mom buy the new package of VHS tapes? So my dad had the elaborate setup to record everything, and I can remember doing that stuff, and it's just, I don't want to say it. I can't say it's lost on kids these days. It's it's point, it's click. They can do whatever they need to, and it's right at their fingertips. We had to work for it. Okay,
we did. We had to suffer uphill both ways. But no, we were at last year. We the local minor league baseball team had a 1984 night. And so we had our display out, and I just took a bunch of stuff that I had. My old Atari 2600, a bunch of VHS tapes, Etch-a-Sketch, a bunch of 80s stuff, and just, put them on a table just as part of the display. And you had people coming up with their kids and saying, like, look, honey, this is how we watch TV. This is a videotape. Look at this. I felt like we were, Neanderthals on display at the Natural History Museum a little bit.
Yeah, that's... God, I brought home a VHS player from my mother's house, and I was showing my kids, like, what? Like, what is this sorcery?
You had to rewind it? What does it even mean, rewind?
You had to rewind. I had the separate VHS rewinder that was next to everything.
Yes, and there was a rewinder that looked like a car, or a rewinder they looked. Yes.
I'm telling you, kids these days have it way too easy.
Welcome to old folks complaining.
Yeah. Why We Bust presents Old Folks Complaining about things.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Speaking of carrying a proton pack for multiple hours at a time in your 40s is a task.
It is. I actually, I had unrelated, but I had a hernia operation earlier this year, and it was odd, like asking, my doctor said, do you have any questions for me? I'm like, this is going to sound odd, but I carry around a very heavy, 30, 40 pound proton pack. How long before I can start doing that again? And he was rather amused that was the question that he had to answer before I went into surgery.
It's relevant. It is a very relevant question.
It is.
And hopefully I hope your doctor not only saw the humor in that, but the pride that you had in asking that, because that is a thing of beauty to ask about the proton pack when you're going into hernia surgery.
Yes.
All right. So Real Ghostbusters comes out. Ghostbusters 2 is next up. You're a little bit older, probably could appreciate it a little bit more.
Yeah. It's funny how many people, especially, people who were of age during that time, when they talk about Ghostbusters, if they're not a fan, a lot of the things they talk about are actually from Ghostbusters 2. The Vigos, the Statue of Liberty, the Slimer interactions. It's funny that for a lot of people, it just all blends together. And
I can see that.
as the fans, we know not just, difference between each movie, but each episode of the cartoon, each episode of Extreme Ghostbusters, et cetera, et cetera. But it's something with any kind of like expert kind of thing or special interest. You forget that for most people, it's all just this big blob of the stuff that, yeah, that's Ghostbusters.
Right. It's for the casual fan, the melding of the two movies, I think may be appropriate, but like, as for me, because they were far enough apart, I never had that happen with me. Like Ghostbusters 2 was Ghostbusters 2, Ghostbusters was Ghostbusters.
No. Yeah.
But what's your favorite of the two?
I mean, and I've got a buddy who's very much into film. He almost went to film school until he found out how much it cost back before digital. But Ghostbusters is one of his favorite movies, just movie wise. I mean, it is a very tightly scripted, action-packed movie, and it's very unique in that it is both character-driven, but has the big action sequences. The comedy is very dialogue-based, which is odd for what is really a special effects movie. And I mean, the cinematography is amazing. My favorite part, and I don't write a lot of fan mail, but Ernie Hudson, I have met him a few times, and I handed him a letter the last time I talked with him that just said that Judgment Day scene with him and Aykroyd in the car is just one of the best, my favorite scenes in cinema, because it sets up the whole third act. And it's something that I feel that 2016 and some of the newer movies don't do, which is provide some actual dread and some actual stakes.
Mm-hmm.
That says, let's pretend for a second that this is really happening. What would it mean? And sometimes we're kind of afraid to do that, I think, in the more recent movies. And he did a great job together with Aykroyd of just that sort of pause right before they get into the big third act of saying, what if this were really happening? What would this mean? And it just, watching it again, I get chills just that it gives you that little bit of stakes that makes the release and the jokes and everything that Bill Murray does, it makes it land so much better because of that. And I think that's something that and again, it's lightning in the bottle. You can't necessarily get that in every movie, but
right.
That scene right there is what makes the first movie my favorite.
It added weight,
yes,
to
precisely.
what was about to happen. Judgment Day. That the lightning in a bottle comment, I hear a lot about the original 1984 movie, and it's so correct, because as hard as filmmakers can try to match how that movie hit all the notes between the cast, the settings, the actual production of it,
the song,
the heart,
the score,
that the movie has.
And the song.
Yeah, it's. In my humble opinion, it will never be matched. And Ghostbusters 2 did a great job of trying to recreate it, but it's like Back to the Future. Like Back to the Future, great movie. Absolutely, it's my two favorites are Ghostbusters and Back to the Future.
Yep.
But Back to the Future 2, try as they might, wasn't quite as good as the first one. It's still a great movie.
No, for sure. And that's common. It's funny. My film friend, we were talking about, movies where the second one is better. And oftentimes it's when they try to do something completely different as opposed to trying to recreate it, like Alien versus Aliens. They're two completely different movies entirely. But I was asking him, what's your favorite example of that? And he kind of looked sheepish for a moment, but he's like, Paddington 2 is a better movie than Paddington. And I'm like, okay, fair, yeah.
I've seen the first one, but I have heard the second one is better.
Yep. So
that's just the way it happens. And if anybody out there in streaming land is wondering, Back to the Future 3 is actually my favorite out of the trilogy. So it's not often heard that the third Back to the Future is somebody's favorite, but it is my favorite.
It has its charm to it. It definitely. I mean, the train alone. If you're an engineering nerd like me, that's and his kids Jules and Vern.
Yes. I like that it's a little bit more dusty, more gritty, more
Literally.
like the future's literally exactly like the future's cool and all.
Mm-hmm.
Going to the 50s is really cool, but going all the way back to the Wild West, where
the Old West is
it limited.
It works so well with the character. Not that we're going to make this the Back to the Future podcast,
no.
But yeah, Doc Brown, he just works so well in that era. It's just the whole. I've made a Wild West Victorian sort of steampunk pack for an event, and nice. I really want to revisit it and kind of make it a little better so I can wear it to more events, because it does fit, and it's been brought back in the comics. One of the first IDW comics had a Wild West time travel, so it just feels like that there's like these eras of, and I'm this is going deeper than probably need to, but the 80s and the 1880s are like these there was this rapid change where but the thing I love about Back to the Future, Ghostbusters, is the technology could be built by someone in their garage or somebody just starting a small business. There was this idea that home computers and this sort of you didn't need to be a billionaire, you didn't need to have a ton of resources to do something new and exciting. And it's the same thing with the 1880s with the steam engine and with the telegraph and telephone. There was this sort of rush forward in technology that did not rely on, sure, the railroads, you had to have the tycoons and everything, but there was a lot of people just experimenting on things and making amazing things. And we're getting a little bit of that now, hopefully, again, with, stuff like 3D printing, stuff like, the different, large language models out there, some of the things that, are available for people to make things on their own. We're in an era like that, I think, that hopefully is going to be a positive thing. We'll see.
Right. So I had a segue with talking about Doc Brown, Old West, limited resources. When you first started doing this,
yes,
what was your setup? Because some people walk into it, full proton pack, because HasLab is out now, and you can do that. But I know, back even heck, 5 years ago when I started, I didn't have that luxury. I had the Spirit 80% stock pack that I came to my first event with, and I saw the guys with the full size, and I'm like, oh no, I gotta do something. So I fully built the 80%. And what did you start with?
So our first ones were styrofoam. Basically, we cut them out of styrofoam and put Bondo and sanded them and painted them, and they look decent for Halloween. And then the next year, I made this pack behind me that is still around. It's what we call a Home Depot pack. It's Norm's plans from the internet. It's got the Clippard valves are shampoo bottles, Pert shampoo trial size that they changed from a round to an oval shape a few years ago, which ruined Clippard valves for everybody. It's got the Pringles can for the end filter. It's got the middle section of a floor lamp for the ion knob. It's all found pieces, parts, and it was my pack for a good many years until it started falling apart whenever I put it on. So it's been signed by Aykroyd, and it was signed by Ernie Hudson. So it's up there safe and sound while I've got my other packs. I've got an Anovos pack, and I've got a HasLab, and I've got a Spirit one that's been modified, and but none of them really just, doing it yourself with your own two hands out of whatever you can find nearby. That's kind of that's something that you don't have to do anymore. And I'm not going to say, oh, it was better back then, but it definitely was a different feeling where you're like, I made this with whatever I could find, and it looks pretty good.
No, that's half the fun of this, right? Is creating something that you can be proud of.
For sure.
And that's even though I started with an 80% pack that's behind me, it's got my own touches on it. The full size Spirit that I'm building completely stripped down and basically rebuilding that from the ground up.
Mm-hmm.
But to know that you did it from spare parts, odds and ends, and it's still holding up on the wall today, folks, that is cool. And it's autographed by a couple of the Ghostbuster greats.
No, yeah, and I appreciate that. Yeah, it's I love, everyone does different things. People love 3D printing. People love, I know people who do fiberglassing. I've always been an upcycler. I love, repurposing stuff, and I love updating from the old toys. So like a ghost trap is a heavy thing to carry around. They're awkward. So my regular trap that I wear is an old 80s Kenner trap that I've painted out electronics to, made it look like an actual trap, but it's that smaller size. And I love the fact I got to talk with Dan Schoenig, who did the IDW comics, and he drew in there. The Winston is facing up his old drill instructor, because in the comics he was a Marine, and he's got the little he's got the Kenner size trap. And I'm like, okay, thank you for making that semi-canon. Now I appreciate it that I can do that. Our my 80% spirit pack. I'm 6'3". The little thrower that they have on there is made for 8-year-olds and 9-year-olds. So I grabbed the thrower from the old 80s pack, and again painted it, added electronics, made it, because it's not so big that it overwhelms the spirit pack, but it's enough that you can hold it in your hand and it feels like an actual thing. So I love taking the old, and I try to find broken toys. I don't want to like ruin any trap that's still in pristine condition, but anything that I can upcycle, that's what you said, add your own touches to it, update it. And that's the great thing about Ghostbusters is we have this conceit that we are franchises. And so not everything has to be exactly the same. If we were really a franchise of Ghostbusters, we would have, their equipment, but we'd have to modify it. We'd have to change it, to suit our needs. We wouldn't all have Cadillacs. We would have Mini Coopers or Dodge Magnums or pickup trucks. So I love that thing about Ghostbusters. And yeah, the person who just in chat that, the kid from Goonies, Data. Yeah. And the original makers, and, just doing what you can with, back when I was in Science Olympiad, when I was a kid in school, we had the people who were really great at making like the mousetrap vehicles or the egg drops. And you had people who would make them perfectly and they'd be finely tuned. But every so often something would go wrong with them at an event. And like, oh, we weren't planning on the floor being textured, or, oh, this thing wasn't exactly right, or some spring broke. And I was the one who's like, oh, okay, the event's in an hour and a half. Well, give me a ballpoint pen and a mousetrap and a protractor and some twine, and I'll throw something together. And it won't win, but maybe we'll get a couple points for, showing up 6th out of 10 or something. So I've always been kind of that improvisational engineering. And that's, I think, why I love Ghostbusters and Back to the Future and Fallout and all those kind of, lived in universes a lot more than the sort of pristine kind of billionaire tech that a lot of superhero movies have these days.
I could not agree with you more on everything you just said. Franchises are going to be different. Everything's not going to be like New York, right?
Yep.
That's one of the reasons I rock the blue jumpsuit. Yeah. It's well, be honest. Part of it is that I'm colorblind, and I always thought that they had navy blue jumpsuits in Ghostbusters too. But I mean,
that's
the navy blue looks good
still, because the lighting changes it. So,
and if you I know if you do the deep dive, the dark blue is actually the Chicago color. So there we go.
There you go.
But I'm that guy too, where if something breaks around the house, I'm the dad that has the junk drawer that I'm pulling open, going, all right, what can I do to rig this? What do I have here? I got a drywall screw. I got a cork from a wine bottle. I'm going to make something work here.
I've got an inanimate carbon rod.
There you go. Exactly. Whatever works. But
for 100%.
That's I think that's some of the ingenuity that really shines when you're part of a franchise or doing stuff like this, is making your own touches and, you know, putting your own
Making it
spin
your
on
own.
stuff. Because nobody's gonna be New York. Let's be a little bit different.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
we'll fast forward a little bit from Ghostbusters 2, and we brought up Extreme 20 minutes ago. Did you get into Extreme Ghostbusters? Because I know that I was in my, you know, late teens by the time that started. So I caught an episode here or there, but it didn't really hit me until I was older. Was that something that you watched and were into when it was on?
No, this is the same thing where I may have seen an episode here or there, you know, just because, you know, I remember the original cartoons, but, you know, it wasn't something that until I actually went back and watched it again, you know, more recently, that I kind of appreciated what they were doing with it and how it was sort of, I think, the start of this, you know, what we have now of sort of like the expanded Ghostbusters universe, where it's not just the 4 original Ghostbusters. It's anybody can be a Ghostbuster. Really started, I think, with that.
Yes.
And Rick Moranis, but that too.
Yeah. That's very, very true. Which we brought up Spaceballs earlier too. I don't know if anybody else is excited, but if you haven't seen the announcement, Spaceballs 2 is happening, folks. Spaceballs 2 is happening with Rick Moranis.
This better not be an elaborate prank. That's all that I'm saying.
You know, I don't think Mel Brooks would do that to us. I'm invested. I want to see what happens. I don't know. Again, as a child of the 80s, I rewound that alien scene with the chest burst. I rewound that so many times. Me and my buddy probably wore out that DVD or that VHS. Classic movies. Again, we're aging ourselves. So
no. But you know, it's funny. We've got 20 somethings in the group who, you know, discovered it from the video game or discovered it from, you know, their parents loved it. So it's there is sort of like and again, it's because, you know, kids who are now old enough to like it, but there is a little bit of a renaissance of the 80s kind of you know, just that very active. And it was funny. We had, like I said, the 84 night at the ballpark, and it's how many of these, let's be honest, nerd movies, but like the sort of fantasy adventure technological sci-fi, like from 83 to 85, you just had this enormous amount of not just the big ones that everyone remembers, like Goonies, Ghostbusters, Back to the Future, but we're talking Never Ending Story, Last Starfighter, you know, things that I remember watching on cable, you know, when I was a kid, that, you know, it seems like everybody had maybe 2 or 3 videos on VHS that just happened to be ones that you had that your friends didn't, that you watched all the time. And, you know, Last Starfighter was one of those for me for sure.
Great movie. You know, it doesn't get enough love these days, and that's a shame.
No, and it's every kid's dream, of course, that you're going to be so good at a video game that you get called on an adventure.
Right? That was always my hope with racing games, but you know, as you get older, it gets harder and harder to play video games, and there's no way you're going to get me on a racetrack going 200 miles an hour on it. Anyways, so let's fast forward.
Prepare to fast forward.
We had the video game. Yep. Fast forward. Some raspberry jam.
When does this happen in the movie?
We're in now.
What happened to then? We passed it. When?
Okay.
Just now.
Oh my God. So good. I'm gonna have to rewatch that soon.
I know.
Anyways, so Afterlife comes out.
Yes.
Or the lead up to Afterlife. Did that get you more excited for Ghostbusters as a whole? Or did your Ghostbusters train start before that?
No. So like I said, we've started doing like the franchise based stuff, you know, 2014, 2015. So it's odd that Ghostbusters has almost become like there's Ghostbusters, the movies and the films and the media stuff. And then there's Ghostbusters, the thing that we do. And they're related, but they're almost like different in my mind, where, that I personally do buy into this, that, I am just like a working stiff busting ghosts. And, the guys out in New York get all the credit. They're making movies about them, but it's something that we just do. And so I was definitely excited to see the movie, but, for me, Ghostbusters as a thing that we just do, Why We Bust, was already something that was sort of my own in a way. So, it was great to be part of it, and that, that we got to go, I drove my Mini up, and a few of our team got to see, as I mentioned, the premiere, and I got the picture of I didn't print up, but my car in front of the firehouse. That was just amazing, like lifelong dream.
That's
driving my Mini Cooper Ectomobile around Manhattan. That's just, just a chance to do that. I mean, it's bizarre that's something that we as human beings can do.
8-year-old you is jealous, very
Indeed.
jealous.
Yes, precisely.
Yes. So now, because you guys were around in 2014, 15, did you have any interaction with the 2016 movie premiere or anything, or was that we were
still small? We occasionally work with the Detroit crew, and they're much more established. They're a bigger group. Detroit's a bigger city, and so they were involved with that. But we didn't go out to LA or anything like that for that. We did get to go. I did take the car out to LA for the 35th, the Ghostbusters Fan Fest, which was amazing. But the premiere, we just sort of went to a movie theater here in town for that, and it was so cool that was really the start of the resurgence that we were seeing today of that people were thinking of Ghostbusters as a thing that's actively happening instead of just a thing that was nostalgic for the 80s.
It put it back on the map.
Yep.
And we've talked about it here on the podcast before. I don't like to go deep dive into it unless people really want to. I loved it. I thought it was great. I have my issues with it, of course,
sure,
but it got people back and interested into Ghostbusters.
Yep. And it actually, it affected what I do in a way that I work at NASA, and I do a panel at our fan expo every year on the science of Ghostbusters. And if a proton pack could actually work, what would it look like? And why can't you actually make one that small? And if you could make a self-contained particle accelerator that big, why it would be worth billions to the medical field, and you wouldn't be busting ghosts for $80 a pop with it. And what started me doing that was Dr. Lindley Winslow, I believe is her name, was the science advisor on the 2016 film. And she was here in town, did a talk about, she was involved in neutrino physics. And she gave a talk, and I talked with her a little bit, and then actually contacted her and found out that one of my alma mater, Case Western Reserve here in town, some of her people that she's worked with were actually doing research here in town. And I got some of them to come out for my talk, and it became a regular thing that I do every year now. So I had a really great experience where I got to meet the science advisor on the 2016 film and find out that she worked with people here locally at our university, and they came out, and it was just a very cool thing in that regard as well.
That's amazing how stuff like that comes full circle. Like the mechanics of how this would actually work in real life. There are very few of us that can say they know how to do that with the inner workings,
Yeah, we actually had a cyclotron here in Cleveland at NASA. It got decommissioned a while back, but yeah, it's cool just that a lot of the stuff that I get to do, for my job is dealing with some of these the technological things that we get to talk about in the movie. It's just a really cool thing that I get to share some of that through the cosplay.
Now, fun fact about the 2016 movie. There is a deleted scene where they actually have a proton cannon mounted on like a SWAT vehicle. Go check it out. It's actually when they have the I think it's a scene with the officers and everything. It's kind of into like the back left area. But it's a giant proton cannon mounted on this SWAT vehicle. The local car museum, Volo, which is where we did our Ghostbusters Day a couple weekends ago. We took a picture with it, and I was privileged enough to get all the way up on top and ride the proton cannon.
Oh, nice.
Yep. So, somewhere
cool.
somewhere on my Facebook page, there is a picture of me riding a proton cannon. So for all those out there, I implore you, go check it out. It's on our Windy City Ghostbusters page as well. So good time was had there. So, all right.
Excellent.
So Afterlife happens 2016. That brings us to Frozen Empire. What are your thoughts on Frozen Empire? Because I know I have mine. I saw it. I was at the premiere. I saw it. Walked out of the theater, and I was like, okay, that was good. What are your thoughts on Frozen Empire?
I mean, it's the same thing. It was good. They tried to do too much. Is that they had too many characters. They had the original Ghostbusters. They had all the from Afterlife, and then they added in Patton Oswalt. They added in new characters, and there just wasn't enough for everybody to really feel like they were doing something. And that's what kind of it was good, but it felt like they just had to cram too much into it, and it just couldn't support it. And that's why the first one was so tight. Is you were focused on these half a dozen characters, and you really got a chance to connect with them. But I feel like you didn't really get a chance to do that in Frozen Empire.
I felt like Garaka showed up, and we didn't have that Ernie and Dan scene anywhere before that.
Right. There's nothing that said that there's real peril here, and that kind of hurt it a little bit.
We know what's going to happen. They're going to defeat him. New York's going to go defrost.
Right.
I see the saving grace from all that was, I think, the Ecto getting possessed. Like that was a cool scene there.
Yes. And that's something that's happened. I think that's one of the, you see that. I think every fan had that idea at one point in time. So it's something that it's funny that and again, it's a lot. That's the cool thing is, seeing like what would happen if this happened, what happens if actually seeing it happen in a movie is very cool.
Right. Now, Red Parka, do you own one?
I do not. When we do events, I actually have the red Marty McFly puffer vest that I wear over mine.
Nice.
So that way I can still see my you can still see the patches. But we do have several people who have the parka. I've looked at it. I mean, it does get cold here in Cleveland, so we do have a use case for it.
Dude, Chicago, I totally get it. Yes. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, we both have that, and I'm right on the lake here. I live downtown, so I'm right in the in that wind tunnel. But speaking of Frozen Empire, very cool, literally. The past couple years at my Science of Ghostbuster panel, I've gotten one of our cryogenics people to come and talk about things, and they've done experiments just on their own. This would be obviously not because of the movie, but they took a glove and filled it with ballistics gel and basically liquid helium, liquid nitrogen, like how long it would take to actually freeze somebody solid. And so we actually have data on that. And obviously you couldn't do it like instantaneously like happened in the movie, but they've actually run these experiments like with hard data of like, at what point does it become solid and what point does it crack apart? And it's, having somebody who's actually done these kind of experiments and having them talk about it is a very cool thing to do.
That is cool. Bringing the real science of it to Ghostbusting.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And you work in a field where, you see stuff, like I said, cyclotrons, all stuff that is relevant to what you do that I think kind of heightens your experience and makes it a little bit more cool, right?
No, for sure. And it's, we have a facility out in Sandusky, one of the largest vacuum chambers in the world. And parts of the Avenger were filmed, or the first Avengers were filmed there. The NASA facility in the Avengers is the NASA facility here in Sandusky, Ohio. The exterior is some high school in New Mexico because NASA facilities don't look cool from the outside. But
of course,
but it's great that we have this control room where we've got the vacuum chamber, the vibration table, the huge acoustic testing center, and we have all of these monitors and all of these dials. And in one corner, there's a screen that just shows the scenes from the Avengers over and over again, so that people who are visiting can see, yep, there we are. Yeah, there's Nick Fury. There's this, and one of the technicians. This was before my time at the center, but he had like a 2-week assignment just to follow Scarlett Johansson around to make sure that she didn't get in the way of any of the experiments. And like, man, that's a tough job right there.
Yeah, tough job. Nothing I'd ever want to do.
You take your sacrifices in this field sometimes.
Darn that Black Widow, I tell you, getting into everything. Oh boy. All right. So we know how you got here, right? What's your favorite piece of Ghostbusters media?
Oh man. Ghostbusters media.
Movie, comic, cartoon. So I know you mentioned IDW.
Yeah, I've got the complete set here, and I've been lucky enough to meet Dan and Eric who made them. I mean, the IDW comics do a great job of capturing the voice of the characters without trying to, just impersonate the actors, and the art style is just it captures it very well. I actually got to meet David, who's writing the new comics. He's actually from Manchir. He was doing a signing that we supported here a couple weeks ago, and he's great. And the new ones are good. But there was just something about those, that continuing adventures of the original 4 in that movie universe. And as time went on, they added more and more of the real Ghostbusters, and they added in some of the 2016, and they added in some of the
right.
They had that whole multiverse by the end of it. That and they had storylines that really sort of felt like they were part of that movie continuity, and
they roped you in. They really roped you in with those storylines.
Yes, 100%. So I mean, if I had to choose other than the original Ghostbusters movie, which of course is the ultimate, it's definitely something that those comics did. I'm not a huge comic person. I mean, I read them. We support Free Comic Book Day every year. We've got some great comic shops here in town, but I've read through them several times, and they did a very good job of capturing, I think, the essence of Ghostbusters and just expanding it so much. Obviously, you can't have movies with that level of of stories, with that level of effects, but you can draw them. And I got to Dan Schoenig. He did a panel in Dragon Con a couple years ago that I was at, and his background's in animation, and so he drew the comics a lot like you would animate a animated film, where you have like the backgrounds and you have the characters and you move them around, and it provided that cinematic feel in the comic in a great way that again, I'm not being paid, but if you're interested, buy the IDW comics, now available on Amazon.com and your local retailer.
They're not cheap.
Not anymore. They are not. No.
Oh man, if you get the full set, it is outrageous.
Yeah, but if you find somebody who can you borrow them from, because it's definitely worth the read.
No, Steve, you are absolutely correct. If somebody is nice enough to loan you the IDW collection,
yes,
read it, because I think that is the unsung hero of the Ghostbusters universe. If you ask me,
agreed 100%.
Yep. All right, so we have made it to our speed round.
Oh no!
You ready?
No.
Well, you should be. This is easy. All right, ready? Favorite Ghostbuster: Ray, Peter, Egon, or Winston?
Winston.
Favorite ghost: Slimer or Stay Puft?
Is Stay Puft really a ghost? He's an avatar, but Slimer. Everybody loves Slimer.
That's the correct answer. Everybody loves Slimer. Proton Pack or Ghost Trap?
A Proton Pack.
Favorite color?
Blue. No, yellow.
Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Good man. Good man. All right.
Bavarian terror dogs, more specifically.
Yes. So that brings us to the end here. Steve, I want to thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you coming on.
No, thanks for having me.
And we made it to the end of the stream without anything crashing. So
well done.
But the most important question I got to ask you is, why do you bust?
Because busting makes me feel good.
Hey, there's no wrong answer, and that's the perfect answer. So, yeah, I don't know if you can hear in the background. My terror dogs are going nuts.
I do hear that. Yes.
So, well, that.
Uh-oh. You're breaking up a little bit.
The end of the cast here. 30.
You had to say something.
Still there?
Yeah, you froze up. You had to say something about us getting through it with no technical difficulties, then you immediately froze up on my screen.
Oh. I know, right?
Well done.
Oh God, I should have just left it. Oh well. Anyways, come check us out next week if my feed will stay on here. And Steve, thank you very much.
No, thank you
for joining, and continue to follow us. We'll see you later.